Over in Ghana, there are no public restrooms. When you need to go to the bathroom, like, it's just normal. You just go on the side of the road and everybody does it. And so it's just kind of the normal thing. And this particular day, my companion and me were at this house, and they told me to go in the gutter behind their house. And so I was like, okay, no problem. And so I was there and didn't think much of it until a drunk man who had been very drunk grabbed me as I was going to the bathroom and just was trying to give me crap, like, hey, we don't go to the bathroom outside in Ghana. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And then he was like, no, I'm just kidding. And then he went next to me, and I was like, okay, that was so awkward. One thing they'll hear a lot is Obruni, which in Tree is white man. Or they'll hear Brofonio. So they'll just hear little kids going down the road just clapping like, oh, Bruni, and dancing down the road as you walk down the road. They just will follow you and yell that, or they'll yell at you and say, hey, Obruni koko mache, ya fichi gango. It was just the little kids would be chanting, white man, you have gum on your pants. And would just be like, what the heck? But they'd just follow us around and chant that, and that was what they'd do all the time when they saw a white man. It didn't matter who it was. They'd just follow you around and just yell, oh, Bruni Coco Mache, ya Fichigango, you have gum on your pants, but they wouldn't know what they were saying. And their parents would just sit there and laugh on the side of the road and think it was the funniest thing ever. And would just be like, gosh, what's this all about? You just gotta embrace it. It was a lot of fun. So transportation was so much fun. I thought it was fun. A lot of other people didn't think it was very fun. They have what they call the Trotro system. And a Trotro is basically a small, little, tiny, like, minivan. And what they'll do is they will gut it completely. So the floor is metal, the seats, there's no padding, no nothing. It's just like a wood seat that's welded into the base. And they're so close together just to get maximum space. So your knees are like up at your face like this. What they do is they drive down a route. They have routes that they drive down similar to taxis, except they don't go to your house. They just drive to a bus stop, and then you get off, and then they drive on. And so we'd take that all the time. And that's how we got places, is we'd either take that or we'd want to ride our bikes a few miles, which would never happen. So we'd just get on that, and we'd cram in there with some Ghanaians. We'd be sitting on each other, shoulder to shoulder, falling asleep on each other, that kind of thing. And we'd just go to where we needed to go and then climb over people and jump out, and then they'd take off. It was a very interesting way of transportation, I'll say. There was once, I remember, I think it was my first area. We were on our way down to Accra for a Christmas conference, if I recall correctly. And it was so crammed and I was so tired, I actually fell asleep on the woman next to me. She was a big woman. And so I fell asleep on her shoulder, and she thought it was the funniest thing, and so she just kind of cradled my head, and my companions were all laughing at me, and I woke up in Accra, and I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And they're like, dude, you fell asleep on that lady. And I was like, dang it. But that was what happened on Trotros. If it wasn't the missionaries, it was somebody else. We'd always be falling asleep on each other. And the people there are just so friendly and so nice that they just don't care. They're just like, whatever, okay. And so that was what transportation was normally like if we had to go long distances or wherever it was. So they're just super friendly people, super friendly. Like one of the things I found out very quickly at the beginning of my mission is it's actually an insult to not say hello to somebody, which is way different than American culture where we just ignore each other walking down the road. They'd look at me and they'd just be like, you didn't say hi to me. I'd be like, oh, hi. Be like, oh, thank you. What's your name? And then they just introduce themselves. They're just a very friendly people that just wants to be around people. And so that was something I loved because I'm very shy at first. And so for me to make an initial contact with somebody, I would be like, oh gosh, this is gonna be not good. And I'd just sit there and like think, what do I gotta say? But then they'd just jump in and just act like we'd known each other for years. I'd be like, well, okay, this isn't so bad. And so that's something I love, and I've even carried home with me, and I still wave at people and they just ignore me, but that's something that I love over there. Another culture thing that I thought was awesome was just their love of Jesus Christ, how he is everything, how even the people there love to pray. Because for me before, it was like hard for me to get used to praying all the time. But over there, that is all the time. Like, we didn't even have to ask to have a prayer with anybody, because we'd just sit down and they'd be like, oh, can we have a prayer? And I'd be like, yeah, we can. And even a blessing on the food, they'd just be like, can we pray? And it was just something that I just really appreciated. When we do our All Africa Service Project is what it was called. It was where we'd all do service for the people in our communities. And we would get such a good turnout. We'd have people everywhere. You could see it everywhere you went. They just wanted to help. They didn't like to be helped, but they loved to help. I remember so many times. There was once we cleaned the city of a shaman, and we had to have had 400 to 500 people. The street was just lined with people, and we were just cleaning gutters, getting all this garbage out, and it just had such a positive impact. So that was something I also really admired, was their love of service. I actually love all their food, so most people will be like, what? But their foods, they're kind of blandish. They eat the same thing over and over again over there, and so it was just getting used to eating the same thing every day. But they have some different foods. One of them is called fufu, and that was my favorite. I loved it so much. And it's pretty much a ball where they take cassava, a root, and they take plantain, which is sort of like a banana, and then they boil the two of them and mash them together into a dough, and then they put it in soup. And my favorite soup was peanut butter soup, is what we call it in America. They call it inkatinquine. And it just, they'd put fish, or they'd put chicken, or they'd put goat, or they'd put whatever they could find inside. And then you just eat it with your hand and just pinch it off like this, and then take it and swallow it. So it took a little getting used to swallow it, because when I first left, I couldn't swallow a pill, the smallest pill on the market, and I got to where I could swallow something that big by the end of my mission. It kind of freaks my family out just a little bit. They have another thing called banku. It's the same thing, except it's just cassava dough in water, and then they stir it, and it will start to ferment and to harden into a ball as well. And then it's just the same thing, but they eat it a little differently with some different stuff. I still like it with the peanut butter soup, but they'll take peppers, and they'll take really hot jalapenos and ghost peppers and anything hot they can find, and they'll take onions and tomatoes and mash it all together and grind it into a salsa type thing. But it's a lot thicker, or not really thick. It's not watery or anything. It's just kind of there. And then you just dip it in and then swallow it. And that one would burn my throat, but I got used to it after time. They love spicy food a lot. And so there's another one called akbele. Akbele is what the Awais eat, the Awa tribe. And it's just corn flour mixed in water and boiled until it becomes a dough. And that was another one of my favorites, because it wasn't fermented like banku. That was something that I liked a lot to eat also with the soup. They had something called ampasi, which is what they loved in the eastern region, which is where the Akan tribe was. Ampasi is just, they take a yam, which is like a big, huge, long potato about this long, and they'll take it and slice it up into little slices, and then they'll boil it, and then they will give you like a tomato pasty type thing. We called it stew. Here in America, we would call it spaghetti sauce, I guess. but they put vegetables and chicken and meat and different things inside. They just load it with stuff. And then you just take, and after it's boiled, you just take and break up off a piece about the size of your fingers, and then you just dip it in and chew it. That's the only food really you can chew over there without gagging it down. And that was something we ate a lot. Another food was rice. Rice was an everyday thing. We had fried rice. We had something called jollof rice, which is where they take tomato stew or spaghetti sauce, and they instead of boiling rice in water, they boil it in that, and it becomes like Mexican rice. They have huache, which is rice and beans cooked together. They have just plain rice and stew, which is just plain rice with the stew put on top with a piece of chicken on the side. They love their rice. And they don't have dessert. They don't like sugar. So, well, I guess there's one dessert, but they love something called tom-toms, which is just a cough drop. It's just a cough drop with menthol in it. And so that was their dessert. They'd always give them to us and be like, here you go, here's dessert or something. Or they'd pull out a pineapple or a mango or coconut. So they're not really into sugar. In fact, I gave some kids in my first area some Smarties and some Kool-Aid, and their faces were priceless. They spit it out on the ground. They didn't want anything to do with it, and they actually ran over and grabbed some bonku and hurried and swallowed it to get the taste out of their mouth because they didn't want to taste it. And so they're just anti-sugar. And so we didn't really have desserts. They like really spicy things for their desserts as well. One thing they have is something called sobolo, which is a drink, and it's they take a leaf and boil it, and then they'll put different things inside. It's this red drink, but they'll always put either peppers or ginger inside to make it like kick, so it'll like burn your throat. It was the best way to get rid of a cold, but they'd always drink it by the cupful, like a cup this big. But that's about all they got for food, and then they just rotate those every day, and sometimes they'll branch out and get other things. They'll add variations. They'll use different plants or something, and so use different soups. They have different kinds of soups. One was called okra soup, or here we call it okra, and they just cut up an okra, and then they'll boil it, and it makes it really stringy and slimy, and so you just dip your stuff in there and eat it. And so I really liked it. When I first showed up, I thought I was going to die because I didn't eat anything. I didn't eat for like 2 days at a time because I didn't want to eat anything. And I started praying for a desire that the food would become more tasty to me, that it would become better to me. And it actually did, to the point where every time I ate American food towards the end of my mission, I would get sick. And I would have to stay in the apartment all day because I couldn't get out because I'd just be done. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. And so I'd just have to stick with their food. And even when I got home, it took me 6 months. It had to have been by April before I could actually eat every food we have here without getting sick. Sugar just about killed me. Everything about killed me. Living in Ghana, I've had many people that have asked me what it's like over there, or think they know what it's like. The housing there is, they're very smart in some ways of how they build their houses and different things like that to get them elevated in different things. But for the most part, it depends on where you are. 2 of my areas were out in the bush area, is what we called it, out in a place called Atimpoku and Asuchari. And so they're right on the edge of a river, and there's not much out there. It's pretty much the jungle. And so the people, in order to live, what they have done is they take mud houses and then they live inside of those. It's basically, there's no air conditioning and all you have is fans. That's what the people use, is fans. And if you can't get a fan, then you don't have a fan. So the heat is really, really intense. It's about 92 degrees daily, year-round, never changes. And it's about 98% humidity. So we'd carry around handkerchiefs to wipe the sweat off our face. It was very intense heat. So you really tried to find ways to stay cool, and that was usually just by drinking water. or just getting used to it like I did after time. And so the houses that they have, they stay more cool just because they build them so thick. The mud houses or the brick houses that they make out of sand are usually about something like this thick. And so it's able to keep the heat down just a little bit, so then it's not as intense, but the humidity still is a bugger to deal with. And then down in Accra, it's a little bit better, but it's still the sand houses, and so they're trying to do the same thing of keeping them cool, and it works in some ways, but it's a lot of fun to live in. It reminds me of camping, to be honest. Ghana is actually the safest country in Africa, one of the safest countries in Africa, because they are the only country, I believe, in all of Africa that has not been in a civil war since their independence. And so I even asked many of them, and they're just like, we don't like blood, we don't like blood, we don't like to see it. And so they just have that fear of having blood on their hands. So I never felt like I was really in any danger, maybe once or twice, and it was just because of some drunk people had made some poor decisions and were not in control of themselves. But even then, there were many people around that would run over and help us and be like, oh, you're a white man, I need to help you. And so they get the person away, and we didn't have a problem. It's a very safe place to be. They speak very slow. Many times I'd be sitting there with them, and I'd be teaching them, and I'd be talking slow. But I'd start talking, and the people would be teaching would be like, huh? And they'd look at my companion and be like, brother, this boy right here, he don't know what he say. Every time I hear him, he just say, shwee, shwee, shwee. And I'd be like, what? And I'd just be like, you can't understand me? And they'd be like, no. And so I'd have to dumb it down and just be like, hi, me Landon, this be how it be. But most of the time they were not very interested in listening to you speak in English, because they're very proud of their languages. In Ghana they have 58 languages throughout the country. I spoke a little bit of 7 of them, about 7 or 6. I spoke a language called Twi, which is the most popular in Ghana. Then they spoke Ga, Ewe, Krobo, Dungbe, Hausa, and Frafra as well. For my friends over there in Ghana, I love every single one of you, and I miss you all so much. I wish that I could come back this summer and come and see y'all. Stay true to the gospel, because it will bless your life forever.